What if the most feared Mustang ever built was never the fastest Mustang you could actually buy? What if Ford built one of the wildest engines of the era, then hid it in a car that never turned a single NASCAR lap? It sounds like a contradiction. It is also exactly what happened. This is the Boss 429. To collectors, it is the holy grail of Mustangs. The rarest, the most expensive, the most muscular pony car Ford sold in the entire muscle car era. Only a little over 1,300 were ever built. Under that long hood sat a 7-liter monster Ford nicknamed the semi-hemi. And for over 50 years, the story has been told the same way. The ultimate Mustang, the fastest, the king of the street. There is just one problem with that story. Almost none of it is true. The Boss 429 was not built to rule the street. In stock form, it was not even the quickest Mustang on the dealer lot. And the engine that made it a legend never earned that fame in a Mustang at all. It earned it in a completely different car. So, what was Ford really up to? Why build a ferocious racing engine, then choke it down, and bury it in a car that would never see the track it was built for? To understand that, you have to forget the drag strip completely, and look instead at a banked oval down in Alabama. Because the real story of the Boss 429 does not start with speed. It starts with a rulebook and a war. By the end of the 1960s, America's car makers were at war. Not a war of words, a war of horsepower. And the biggest battlefield of all was NASCAR. On those giant high-speed ovals, the old saying ruled everything. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. A checkered flag on the superspeedway sold thousands of cars in the showroom. And in 1964, Chrysler had dropped a bombshell on that battlefield. The 426 Hemi, a race engine so dominant it rewrote the record books. Ford was getting beaten, and Ford hated getting beaten. So Ford's engineers went away and built an answer. A brand new 7-liter V8, displacing 429 cubic inches. Its combustion chambers were shaped like a crescent, halfway to a true Hemi. So everyone called it the semi-hemi. Its factory nickname was the shotgun. On paper, this was Ford's answer to finally beat the Chrysler Hemi on the high banks. But there was a catch. In racing, there is always a catch. NASCAR had a rule designed to stop factories from building pure one-off race engines. If you wanted to race an engine, you first had to sell it to the public. They called it homologation. You had to put the engine into a real production car that ordinary people could walk in and buy. And the magic number was 500. Build and sell at least 500, and your engine was legal to race. Simple enough, except Ford spotted something in the fine print. The rule counted engines. It never said which car those engines had to go into. Read that again, because this is the whole trick. Ford did not have to sell the engine in the car it actually wanted to race. And the car Ford wanted to race was not the Mustang. It was a sleek, long-nosed intermediate called the Torino Talladega. So here was the plan. Race the big shotgun engine in the Torino on Sunday, but sell that same engine to the public inside the Mustang. Two completely different cars. One beautiful loophole. And that is how a NASCAR engine ended up in a pony car that would never turn a lap of the sport it was built for. But there was a problem, a big one. Dropping that huge engine into a Mustang was far easier said than done. The shotgun was enormous, just too wide for the Mustang's engine bay. It would not fit between the towers that held up the front suspension. So Ford handed the whole headache to an outside specialist company called Kar Kraft. Ordinary Mustangs rolled off the regular assembly line near Detroit. Then they were shipped away to Kar Kraft's plant in Brighton, Michigan to be taken apart. And taken apart is the right phrase. Workers moved the front shock towers outward, by hand, just to make room for the engine. They reworked the entire front suspension. They even moved the battery all the way back into the trunk. Partly for clearance, partly to balance out that heavy iron nose. Every single Boss 429 was hand-converted this way, one at a time. Each one was stamped with its own special serial number, beginning with the letters KK. This was not a car built on an assembly line. It was a Mustang pulled apart and rebuilt around an engine that was never meant to fit. In 1969, Ford built 859 of them. In 1970, just 499 more. Barely more than 1,300 cars in total, and then it was over. And this exotic handmade machine did not come cheap. Stickered for just under $5,000. Roughly twice the price of the basic Mustang sitting in the same showroom. It was the most expensive Mustang you could buy that was not a Shelby. And that engine, the one you paid all that money for, is where the legend really starts to fall apart. On paper, the shotgun looked almost mild. Ford rated it at 375 horsepower. Strong for the day, but hardly the stuff of legend. And this is where the fans always jump in. That number, they insist, was a lie. The Boss 429 secretly made far more. 500 horsepower, some swear. A sleeping giant held back by the factory. So let's be honest here, the way this channel always tries to be. Was the 375 figure underrated? Almost certainly yes. Was it secretly a 500 horsepower street monster? Almost certainly not. Because Ford did something to that engine before it ever reached the road. They put a muzzle on it. The cylinder heads had enormous ports designed to breathe at 7,000 RPM on a banked oval. But on a normal street, the engine almost never spun that fast. So down low, where you actually drive, all that racing hardware just felt lazy. Ford bolted on a modest carburetor, a gentle camshaft, emissions equipment, restrictive exhaust manifolds. Every one of those choices made the car cleaner, quieter, and slower. The Boss 429 was a thoroughbred race engine wearing a leash. And the stopwatch proves it. When a major magazine strapped a stock Boss 429 to its test gear in 1969, it ran the quarter mile in just over 14 seconds, at around 103 miles an hour. Quick, respectable, but nothing that would frighten the neighborhood. Because here is the punchline that never makes it onto the poster. A cheaper Mustang could beat it. That same year, Ford sold another hot Mustang, the 428 Cobra Jet. It cost far less. It was far less exotic. It carried none of the NASCAR mystique. And off the line, the humble Cobra Jet could run right alongside the mighty Boss 429. Sometimes it pulled ahead. Even the smaller Boss 32, built for a different kind of racing, felt sharper through the corners. The Boss 429 was nose-heavy, carrying all that iron up front. So the fastest, most feared Mustang of its day was not the fastest Mustang you could walk in and buy. Read that back. Ford's ultimate street machine was, on the street, quietly outrun by its own cheaper cousin. So why does anyone still worship the Boss 429? Why is a real one worth 10 times what a Cobra Jet brings today? Because its value was never really about the stoplight. It was about what that engine was born to do. Take the muzzle off, and the shotgun woke up as a genuine monster. And out on the superspeedways, the war it was built for was raging. This is where the whole strange story of the Boss 429 finally makes sense. Remember, the engine's true home was never the Mustang, it was the Torino Talladega. And in 1969, Ford's Aero cars went on the attack. That single season, Ford's Aero cars won 26 of the 54 top-level races. Because Ford had pulled another clever trick. While Chrysler was still perfecting its answer, Ford reshaped the nose of the Torino to slice through the air. A longer, smoother front end, fewer sharp edges, less drag at nearly 200 miles an hour. Ford had beaten Chrysler to the aerodynamic loophole, and Chrysler, beaten to the aero punch, answered in the wildest way imaginable. They bolted a pointed nose cone and a towering rear wing onto a Dodge. The winged cars were coming, but that is a story for another day. For now, understand what the Boss 429 truly was. It was one half of a two-car magic trick. The quiet, expensive, hand-built half, the half you were allowed to park in your own driveway. Its job was never to win a grudge match at the local strip. Its job was to make a NASCAR engine legal and to look like a god while doing it. And at that second job, it delivered beyond anything Ford dared hope. Because the Boss 429, in the end, got the last laugh. The very things that made it a strange street car made it a priceless collector car. Tiny production numbers, a famous race engine, a hand-built story, and a nickname, the shotgun, that always sounded far meaner than the car ever actually drove. Today, a genuine Boss 429 can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Far more than the quicker, cheaper Cobra Jet that used to outrun it at a green light. Which leaves us with one last, honest question. Was the Boss 429 the greatest Mustang ever built? If you mean the fastest one off the line, then no, it never was. But if you mean the boldest idea Ford ever smuggled under a Mustang hood, a detuned racing engine slipped onto the street through a hole in the rulebook, hand-built by a separate factory just to satisfy a number, then maybe the legend was right all along. It was just right for the wrong reasons. The Boss 429 was never really about beating the car in the next lane. It was about beating Chrysler on a Sunday 500 miles away. And that war between Ford and Mopar, big block against big block, was only just getting started.